Hi everybody, Dave Rauch here, CEO of ProTech Building Services, and welcome to the Maintenance Manager. And today we are honored to have a special guest, and we have the board president from Villamar, Lisa. And Lisa, can you pronounce your last name for me?
Pieropan.
Pieropan. I wanted to make sure I got that
Thank
correct.
you, Dave.
And Lisa's HOA is in San Diego. It's 84 units, I believe.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk to Lisa about not just her HOA and the HOA dynamics generally, but also her involvement in a major improvement project, or we could call it a renovation project. It was a big project.
Multiple renovations.
Big project. So before we get going, let's, if I could, get Lisa to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the HOA. Like I said, it's 84 units, right?
84 units in the Mira Mesa area. It's on less than 3 acres. A very, very basic property.
How many buildings?
11 residential, 1 pool house, and we had 1 unheated pool and 1 grill. That was the only amenity. And unfortunately, it had suffered for 20 years from escalating critical deferred maintenance.
Gotcha.
So by the time I became board president, we did not have sufficient funding to fund what had become then very serious issues.
And I think you said too, and I'm sorry for interrupting, there was about 50-50 owner-occupied renters?
Yes, it is. 50% owner-occupied.
Okay.
They used to be apartments.
Gotcha.
The board
and when was the conversion take
The
place?
conversion, I think, was in 1978. The board just received 43 pages of documents from the city of San Diego. So we were happy to find those and started out as Villamar Apartments. But now that we have those building documents, we are using them to help owners do architectural changes to the units. Because the complex itself has so few amenities, the board really encourages owners to make improvements inside their unit.
Gotcha. And so the conversion was in 78. When do you recall when the units were built?
76.
76. Oh, so the conversion happened right after it was built. So 76. That would make them, almost 50 years old.
Almost 50 years old.
The buildings themselves,
Yes.
50 years old. So that's about time for a little bit of work, a little makeover.
Which in our case was a great deal of work.
That's right. And going back, just a little bit about you also. You said you were an engineer?
Project engineer, a chief project engineer. So I could bring a lot of those skills to restoring the HOA and use a lot of strategic management processes. But I was also at home recovering from brain injury.
Gotcha.
And so because I was there on site all the time and could see everything about the property, I had to do something about it. I mean, anywhere your eye looked, you could see the deterioration.
Sure. And you said that you have owned your condo 40 years, so you're familiar with condo living?
Yes.
And you're familiar with being on a board of directors?
Yes, I am.
Gotcha. Tell us a little bit about serving on a board, how you became president, why you wanted to first serve on the board of directors. Take us kind of through the journey that you made on the board of directors.
And it's actually 40 years next year. Will be 40 years. But during that whole 40 years, whatever HOA I was living at, I always volunteered. Newsletters, reports, landscape committee, and then serving on the board. But at year 28 of ownership, I was elected to the board of directors at another HOA. And the property, again, was in such poor condition that the board didn't know where to begin. So we hired a past president of CAI to do an assessment, and she gave us board training.
Ah, great.
That was eye-opening for me. I had been an owner and an engineer 28 years, but to actually learn the structure of condo ownership and an owner's responsibility and a board of directors' responsibility, that was the first time I had learned that after 28 years of owning and volunteering during that whole time.
So that's key to success number one.
Yes.
Board training from CAI.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent.
Absolutely. And So that property, we started the same process as I then started at Villamar, a master plan, strategic planning, facilities management plan, because these are the resources that a board needs, because there's so much to do. You have to do several projects concurrently and organize them in a way that they become a resource for the board and can help them do their best job.
Gotcha. And what motivated you to become president of the board, which obviously brings additional responsibilities? Was it because no one else was willing to step up and in?
I would say yes.
Okay.
We have virtually no volunteering in Villamar.
Ah, gotcha. But you do have other board members.
We do have other board members.
Board members by default.
Sometimes that's the case, yes.
Yeah, it's a thankless business.
It is an absolutely thankless
being
business.
on the board of directors, and the other, in my opinion, success tip number 2 is look at it like a business, because you are running a not-for-profit business.
Absolutely, and I think one of the ways that directors can think of compensation for the essentially thankless job and endless hours is you are paying yourself in the restoration of the property. So Villamar, from the time I was on the board until now, the property value has increased $200,000.
Wow.
So that's, in a sense, you're paying yourself that amount,
Sure.
which I think is some compensation for.
Yeah, and again, that's really the board of directors' job, is to maintain, protect, enhance, which really means improving real estate values. Keep those values of all those homes in that community up, keep the community safe so there's few accidents, and have it so that it's a nice place to live for the owners.
Quality of life.
Quality of life, yes.
I think that's an important aspect, because we've addressed so much critical deferred maintenance, and now we're working more into deferred maintenance. We didn't have the funding really to do extra projects, enhancing projects. So we chose very low cost, quality of life projects to improve the property. So we've done things like gardens, fruit trees. Our edible landscape project has become our most popular amenity. Community pantry, composters, garden benches.
Nice.
And these are the things that residents rave about, how happy they are now. And we have many, many long-term renters. When something like doing major repairs in the building might not affect their quality of life.
Sure.
But for them to go out and pick tomatoes.
Yeah. How did you get them engaged to want to do all those cool things?
Well, I do those cool things for the most part, and they enjoy them.
Oh, I see.
But we developed some philosophies on the board, especially with the water shortages here. We thought that if we water it, we should be able to eat it. So that's why we've added so many fruit trees, which we will continue to add.
Yeah.
People go out and they pick fruit, they pick tomatoes, they pick vegetables, and it's for anyone to help themselves.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about what I consider to be one of the biggest challenges serving on a board, and that's raising assessments to either do larger projects that haven't been reserved for, or just to raise, compensate for the rising cost of living. So tell us a little bit about how over the years you've approached raising assessments. Have you ever got it so that, hey, every year this cost of living is going up 5%, so we're going to raise assessments 5% every year? Or was it like, okay, we've got this big project, we didn't reserve enough for it, now we need to special assess or raise assessments?
Well, anytime that there isn't enough money, it's always poor planning on the part of the board, because it's the board that's responsible. But what we did is look at funding differently, redefine funding. So we redefined funding in many ways, not looking at fees or special assessments or loans, which are just not going to fly in the community. What we did instead is we improved operations. So, for instance, we installed a cathodic system for the plumbing lines to reduce corrosion. Well, that's a hefty investment, and we pay a lot in monthly maintenance. However, it's much less costly then the slab leaks at 5 a year, the remediation, and the repairs and the emergencies. So in a sense, by investing in that system, we are being paid back by what is no longer an emergency.
Less repairs.
Less repairs.
Yeah.
So the board chose projects that had a return that was more short term, that we could start realizing that money.
Sure.
We redid our boiler tanks. We made them much more efficient. We reduced it down because we have a boiler system to fund the property, so that we could start getting return on investment on a monthly basis, and then we just pump that back into repairs.
So let me ask, I'm assuming that you had to educate the other board members on the dynamics of how you pay a little now or more later.
Yes.
And then how did you and the board go about educating the homeowners on this so that the assessment was more palatable?
Well, this is what we found. We tried many things, from a website to reports to documents, and I think
In communication with the homeowners?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I think board directors have to determine the lay of the land. What will work on their property? What works on our property is not going to work on another property. We found that facts didn't work, logic didn't work, reports didn't work.
Interesting.
None of that worked. But what ended up working is I created a Friday community report, which was mostly color photos. And we sent it to the membership every Friday by email. And that shows, say, before and after. Or this repair is going on. Because if you do a repair...
Interesting.
Yeah, like a land...
Before and after pictures.
Yes.
What a great idea.
I was going to bring the notebook. I actually did 75 of those reports.
Yeah.
And we showed a lot of things that you couldn't see as an owner. For instance, landscape drains.
Yeah, no, I've seen these before and after pictures here.
Oh, yes.
This is a deck here.
The color didn't come out very well.
Well, it's fine. But anyhow, before and after pictures are just a
All our
tremendous tool.
Structural beams had to be
Yeah,
replaced.
before and after pictures, all kinds of them here. Yeah, no, what a great idea.
And so I wouldn't say that it garnered any volunteers, because it didn't. But it quieted the opposition.
You're right.
And so we could continue with restoring the
Well,
property.
I think that the homeowners certainly would have gotten the sense that somebody's doing something.
And we kept emphasizing, talking about board training, we tried to train the members as well. We would put in the Friday report, Board 101. And this is what a board is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so we just kept going on with that process, and that seemed to make the most impact.
That's a great way, I think, to build trust with the homeowners,
And
which you have to have.
And we kept emphasizing, every day you can see where your assessments are going. Every day, and here's the photos, and here's the project.
That's great.
And as I was saying, particularly something is underground, once it's covered up, they don't know that we did all this work.
Right.
So lots and lots of photos.
Right.
I have a very nice camera.
And you mentioned to me that Vilmar is unmanaged. You have an off-site company
manager.
that does the financials.
Yes.
Did it ever come up in discussion with the board to hire a manager, a portfolio community manager? I mean, when you probably first interacted with CAI, I'm sure they recommended that. 84 units is probably enough that it could benefit from a manager.
It definitely would, and for the most part, I'm currently fulfilling that role. But I would like to have that role done by someone else.
Sure.
I think at this point, we don't have the funding to do that. But I think as we become more stable and finish taking care of our serious deferred maintenance, that there will be more money available for such a...
Well, I think actually, in my opinion, it would be urgent for you to find a manager to replace yourself if you're going to step aside, because I would pretty much assume that nobody else, even if they wanted to do what you did, could do it, because it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, correct?
Correct.
So how much time were you putting in every week, month, day?
40 to 60 hours a week.
Okay, so that's a lot.
But
And,
what I
and you
think,
can understand, there's 350,000 HOAs out there.
yes,
So there's approximately 2 million board members, and not all of them have that kind of time.
no,
And that's why, especially with HOAs that are, say, 40 units and above, they need somebody that can do what you've been doing, which is bringing in experts, communicating, helping to communicate from the board to the association, bringing new laws, and this is California, we have a lot of new laws, to the board. So HOA management is very valuable, but certainly can't really replace what you've done.
no, and that's why I talk about strategic planning. We have in our strategic plan things like make maps, establish procedural documents. Because when we started as a board, there was nothing. Here was a 50-year-old property. We had no legacy documents, no history,
Yeah.
no maps. And so every time I go to a board, I publish it, I give copies to the manager. Here's the map of the landscape drains.
Right.
Here's the map of the sewer lines. Here's the map of the plumbing valves. So to create that database,
Right.
and along with the facilities management plan that we established, the board knows month by month everything that needs to be done on that property. And again, these are the tools that a board has to use.
Absolutely critical, isn't it? And wouldn't it have been easy if you had had those things in the first
So
place?
much easier.
I do have good news. Just last week, CAI's Board of Trustees approved new public policy for the country where it is recommending all kinds of great things as law for all individual states. One of them would be to require reserve studies for every new HOA right out of the gate. It would require a maintenance plan, which is nothing more than a list and a photo of all the common area components, what to maintain, when and how, simple instructions, that also now interacts with the reserve study. And it would come with a better budget that would provide for education of the board members. Because can you imagine if the entire board and not just you were interacting with CAI and getting that
would be fabulous.
education? Or there's also CASAM here in California.
And
But good news for the future for
Good
all
news for the
those new
future.
communities.
And what I tell
Right.
the board, and how important board training is, for the first 10 minutes of every board meeting, I do board 101 training. And we have a different topic every month because directors must teach directors. The board will change, but the corporation continues. So that continuity needs to be established. And one of the things that I teach is the reserve study is the most important resource that a board of directors can have if they know how to use it
Sure,
and if
sure,
they actually use it.
Now has Villamar had a reserve study since inception, since '78?
I
Or
couldn't tell you that.
When
but
you came on the board, did it have a reserve study?
Yes.
Okay, it did.
But I don't think anyone on the board or the HOA had input that study.
Gotcha.
So what we've done is we've made a very, very accurate reserve study from when things were actually replaced. And we have a preventative maintenance program, so we ask for an extension on the life limit.
Great.
But the first,
That is so
right,
smart.
in fact, we just got a 10-year extension on our repiping of the building.
That's fantastic.
Which is $1 million project.
Fantastic.
But what we did, the first board meeting after the election, we went over the reserve study. Not
With the board or
Yes.
with the homeowners too?
with the board. Well, the homeowners are
Okay,
always,
they're welcome, of course.
welcome.
Yeah.
but we went over the reserve study. We evaluated not just the components that showed in the reserve study for replacement in the next year, but 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out.
Yeah.
And then we did an evaluation on each of those components. Does it need replacing?
Jeez.
Can it be serviced?
Yeah.
How much longer can it last? And so from that assessment, we came up with our master plan. Because some things were far past life limit and dangerous. And then there were also many items that were not in the reserve study. There was a great deal of moisture damage on our buildings.
Exactly.
We had to remove a foot of weep screed and stucco around most of the buildings, more than 1,400 linear feet.
Well, I have good news for you there. That you've identified one of the deficiencies of reserve studies in the
Yes.
past, but the reserve study updates the new standards do include reserving for all common area
That would be-
components.
that would be
all,
ideal.
Including the plumbing, the electrical, the sewer laterals, the weep screed, everything. And even structural inspections. So and maintenance. It accounts for maintenance in the reserve study. So the new reserve study standards, which just came out, you're going to start seeing, I think, in the next year, 2, 3, that they're going to be a much more effective tool for board members.
Yes.
Because you have to admit, not all board members are as dynamic, as involved as you are, and intelligent, because you certainly understand the process of how to take care of things today so they don't fall apart tomorrow, how to fix things right away, because so few people understand that if you don't fix that today, you're going to pay more to fix it tomorrow, the next day. The best example
Pay more later stage.
is unfortunately Champlain Towers,
Yes.
where 98 people died. When they first became aware of that concrete spalling and the rebar expansion causing the concrete spalling, the repair was $3 million. Then it went to $9 million. Then it went to, I think, $14 million. But the point is always applicable. You got to repair. The sooner you repair it, the more money you'll save.
See, I think that's one of the things that a new board director should learn first is develop an eye. An eye to see the maintenance. So say they don't feel comfortable with engineering or mechanics. Well, start with their own building. Just walk around the building. Note every single maintenance issue because that's where you live. Walk around the building again. Look at the landscape. Start making a list, because if a board director doesn't see that there's maintenance that needs to be done, then they're not going to replace it.
Yep.
They're not
Yep.
going to take care of it. So
Absolutely.
I think developing that eye, that maintenance eye, is critical for board directors, because ultimately you're responsible for a huge physical property that requires maintenance, engineering,
Yep.
structural changes, and that's what you do need to learn something
And
about.
that's a great class right there, a CAI training class
Develop
for
an
board
eye.
members, developing the maintenance eye.
I
Hard
was-
to do if you're not a contractor.
It was, but I was thinking in your maintenance standards manual, you could start putting some photos at the end. This is dry rot.
Yeah.
This is what happens to the building
Yeah.
when you have dry rot.
And we're going to be doing more on illustrating the difference between corrective maintenance and preventive maintenance issues and items.
I think the reason most boards run into issues is that condo owners do not understand how condo ownership works.
Right.
And they do not understand the responsibilities of the board of directors. And many board directors, it's the same thing.
Right.
Because once the owners are educated, you're not going to have this kind of resistance like at Champlain Towers. We're not going to pay $3 million. That would really take down the resistance, because condos are marketed as affordable housing.
Right.
But almost no one, and I can certainly say from being on more than one board of directors, and until I went through board training myself, almost no one understands the structure of condo ownership.
Now that structure is outlined in the CC&Rs, the documents, right?
Not in a
but
way that's
it's
understandable.
a little confusing.
You're a condo owner now. Here's what this means.
Maybe write it out what the structure actually looks
Yes.
at in a diagram.
Because then boards are not going to get the resistance when they do have to raise assessments.
Right. Right.
And board directors will be on the same page, understanding what they have to do.
Sure.
Because many of them don't. When I tell our owners that they own from the paint inward, they couldn't be more surprised. When I say you also have an 84th interest in the common area, and they're staring at me blankly. They don't know. So they said, I don't care about there. I said, but you have an ownership interest there. You are paying for that every month.
Right. Right.
But from the inside to the outside, there isn't even an understanding
Yeah.
of what they own. That's why a maintenance matrix is so important. And we emphasize that, and we send articles on that. But these are all things that I think are not generally understood in the community. And that's why there's so much resistance, and that's why things don't get replaced. And look at the industry. You're creating these great documents, and with CAI and maintenance standards, preventive maintenance standards, reserve study standards, and all of that has to filter down to the board, who may or may not understand it themselves.
Right.
And it certainly doesn't get out to the
Yeah.
the
Well, I
owners.
do know that CAI works very hard to try to get homeowners and board members to join CAI, the local chapters. There's, I think, 13 chapters here in California, and go to some of those programs that explains those things. But it's hard because, board members are working people and they have a job just like we do, and it's hard taking time out to invest in that education. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, to the industry, is board members don't have the time or don't take the time to go and educate themselves like you're suggesting. Let's talk a little bit about the big project, because you took on a big project. So when did you realize that you had a big issue on your hands, a big challenge, a big problem, and that you needed to come up with the plan and to start tackling this big project?
As I mentioned, I was always involved, and I had tried many years earlier starting the process, attending board meetings, speaking with the board directors there, that we need to maintain the property. But I wasn't getting anywhere.
And it was you that explained to them that if you don't get on top of this, that it's going to basically fall apart and cost twice as much money down the road?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I
So the
guess it
board-
just takes one person to get it going, huh?
And the current board, we're all on the same page. We go over the projects, the scope of work.
So on the big project, there were all kinds of things that you repaired.
Yes.
Are there any kind of other keys to success that you can share with all our viewers who are, mostly board members and managers, on how you did it, how you were able to do it? How long did the project last? How did you have to special assess, take loans? How did you get the funding for it?
Well, let's call our big project the painting project.
Okay.
Most people know you need to paint. They will notice when the building needs painting. So painting was the project, but to get to painting, first we had to repair all the moisture damage in the buildings.
Right.
Then we had to tent for termites. Then we had to replace the structural beams.
Right.
Then we had to replace all the termite damaged wood.
And we're talking wood rot and termite damaged
Yes.
wood. So a lot of wood had to be
A
replaced.
great deal of wood, and the property had never been tented. Not in almost 50 years.
And the wood became bad because it hadn't been painted properly, or just
Hadn't
painted
been a
enough.
problem, but that was part of the problem, because in the strategic plan I mentioned always ask why. Why is this component failing? Why do we have these enormous structural beams that are getting dry rotted? I could tell that the water from the drip edge was hitting on the railing, fountaining, and hitting the beam, and that explained why the beam was dry rotting, but also all the algae and black mold that was growing on our landings.
Right.
So I thought, we're not going to spend $300,000 replacing beams if the cause is still there.
Right.
So
Another key to
always
success.
ask why.
Dig to the root of the problem.
So what we did is we had a roofer install a drip edge that extended out the drip so it came on the second step instead of on the main stairway beam.
Great.
And once we did that, then we could replace the beams. Always
How smart.
ask why.
That's right.
And once we installed the extra drip edge, we no longer had any damage to our stairway beams. Then we could replace them. So we had to replace major structural stairway beams, which are connected to 13 concrete steps. So a whole staircase had to be moved. Then we had to replace termite damaged wood. Then we had to seal around all the windows and all the boards. And then SB 326 came along.
Ah, yes.
So before we painted, we cut open all the stucco on our balcony and landing undersides, because we weren't going to do that after painting.
Sure.
Then we had to get inspections.
Wow.
Then we painted.
It's a lot of work.
So there's the painting project. And Every project is like that. You have an end goal, but there are many sub-projects along the way.
Key learning there.
And what we committed to as a board is the more we repaired, the more we discovered that needed to be repaired. And we committed to do the repair. If that extended the restoration timeline, that was okay because we're committed to doing the repair.
Awesome.
But now we have preventive maintenance on roofing, on sewer lines, on the electrical panels, on the plumbing valves. We had a preventive maintenance program. And what we actually did for the 2024 budget is we were doing 40% contribution to reserve fund. We actually reduced 40% of budget. We reduced that contribution a bit in order to do more preventative maintenance.
Sure.
Which will extend the life of the components.
Right. And
So
buy you time on the project.
Exactly.
Lifeline, yeah. That's an interesting story. Let's talk about insurance, because insurance plays a big role in all this too. So
Huge.
Start back when you first got on the board. What was your thinking and what did you learn about insurance brokers, insurance, the different types of insurance, the G&L, the workers' comp that you had to have,
And
the
we have all
D&O, the E&O. So
We have
love to
all
hear
that.
your experience
Well,
there.
I'll tell you what I did is when we got our premium, I think it was last year, and it was high. And I wrote a very long letter. I outlined the facilities management plan, the restoration plan, the master plan, and I sent it to our broker. And the underwriter reduced our premium,
Really?
yes, based on the information that I provided.
That's great.
And so they're doing the same thing for this year. They sent information, and I sent very detailed information about our plans and what we had done, and they're doing the same thing.
That's fantastic. What I've learned is that obviously this is a hard market because of all the hurricanes in Florida and Texas, because of the wildfires in California. But what's always there for the insurance industry, the insurance carriers, is 30 to 50% of what they pay out is for water intrusion, water leaks. And so you were able to mitigate that problem.
I mean, that was one of our first goals.
That was very smart of you to do that. Great. In other words, that's a number 3 key to success is work with your insurance company, because if you do have a maintenance program and plan, you should be able to get your broker to fight for you to get a reduction in premiums.
Yes, and we did.
So,
and the four categories that the board chose to pursue in terms of restoration projects is health and safety, regulatory compliance, like SB 326, moisture intrusion, and termite infestation. So we really had to take care of those things in order to progress, because you can't paint a building that hasn't also been thoroughly treated, and no moisture is going to come back in again.
Sure. Now, do you see yourself staying at Villamar in the future?
Well, unfortunately, I hear too often that when Lisa leaves, everything's going to fall apart.
And how? Okay, let's just say if you did leave, what would you like to put into place to make sure it doesn't fall apart?
Everything that I'm currently doing, in terms of documents, strategic plan, facilities management, I tell the board, if my airplane falls out of the sky, here's the schedule for the next 5 years. Because so much of that is done on a routine basis, particularly facilities management, preventative management. So they will have the tools, and the management is there too. And our manager says that he talks about Villamar to all of his other managers.
Sure.
So what we're doing is helping them, like I hope this video can help as well. And so he's employing in his company a lot of what we are doing. So we're all sort of coming in alignment. So we're on the same page.
Well, that's great, because nothing is better than helping others to understand what they're dealing with and have some solutions on what they can do. And so I commend you on all the hard work you've done for your HOA. and also for helping us with this video to educate other board members and managers how to get through something like this. Again, thank you so much, Lisa, for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Please stay safe.